let's bring up the next one. Let's see what Dirtrider 146 has to say. Hey, how you doing, Dirtrider?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Just
let me see if I turn off my fan, if that helps a little.
Yeah, or maybe get close to your mic because you sound like you're kind of far away.
Try that. Is that any better?
That's better. Yeah, that's much better. All right.
I had my headset on backwards. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Not a problem at all. I'm just glad it was an easy solution. Sometimes those things yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks for coming on up to be a guest. So let me explain to you real quick before we get into it, because I do really want to hear what you have to say. I time it. I'm going to time it at 5 minutes just so that I give a lot of people the opportunity to come up, number one. And then number two, also, if you don't like where the conversation is going, you have absolutely the opportunity to just dip. I mean, you could do that anyway, but, it gives you more of a reason. You're like, hey, time's up. I'm out. You don't have to say, I'm bored, you suck, or anything like that. And then, but if you want to keep going, if you want to go a little bit longer, we can do that too. So, we'll just see how things go. And then, like I say up there, I don't try to debate. I just try to understand. So I just try to stay neutral. I just want to see where you're at. And
sure.
And then I may ask, some challenging questions here and there. But like I said, I'm not trying to lead you down a path or any gotchas or nothing like that. It's just really to understand. So that's where I'm coming from. All right.
Gotcha.
So with that, Dirtrider, floor is yours.
Thanks. So with that, first of all, thank you for staying neutral. I appreciate that. So here's kind of what my thoughts and where I've gotten. Personally, I believe that we all have a problem with sin that we've had in our lives, whether it is lying, stealing, disobeying our parents. You can use the Ten Commandments and look at those and to say almost all of us have broken them. You might say, well, I've never murdered anyone, and I believe that's there. But actually, if you look at Matthew, it actually goes on to take a bit further and says that if you've hated someone in your heart, you've committed murder to them through your thought life. And so with those things in mind, I realized that I had a problem. And when you start looking at different things, you come to realize that we had that, but God did send his son, Jesus, to die for our sins. And I will state that I'm a Christian. And that if what the Bible says is true and we are judged on those things in a courtroom, because in my mind, I like to make things connect and it makes things easier, I'd be guilty. And so that put a burden on my heart. And that led me down the thought of thinking, what can we do? And when you look at it, a lot of different world religions out there will be paths that man has tried to make to God, doing good things, trying to do good works, trying to justify this problem, because almost all of them are trying to solve for a sin problem. However, when we look at Christianity and the fact that Jesus was sent on earth to take our place and as our as the sacrifice for us, so that we don't have to be punished for our sins, that started to make a lot of sense to me, and it was a God-made path to man, one that made sense that he sees us in the state that we're in with the things that we've done wrong, and that he's provided a way for us to reconcile that. Because if a judge is good, and let's say that I committed some sort of crime, I can't go into the courtroom and say, hey, judge, I know I did these bad things. I know that I'm guilty of that, but you know what? I gave $30,000 to schools to help educate kids. I did all these great things. I even washed your car. I did all these things. If the judge is going to look at me and say, hey, those are great things, and thank you for doing that, but you're still guilty for these things. So in a nutshell, I'm trying to make sure that I'm respectful of your time. That's kind of the thing that made me look into Christianity and why I believe that that's the true religion.
Okay. So actually, yeah, this is good because you actually answered a follow-up question I was going to have. But sounds like, so to answer the question directly, you in your opinion or in your mind, Christianity is the true religion. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, the reasons for you are that like you quoted some things like in Matthew and in the Bible, and that made a lot of sense to you. Is that Is that or it spoke truth to you? Yeah. And then also oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, those things that made sense with me, but the other thing that really kind of made sense to me is when I started to look at the historical facts. I don't know if you've heard of the author.
Historical facts.
But he was I
think I have, yeah.
A devout atheist, and his wife converted to Christianity, and he started to look through. He's not only was not only a writer for a major news publication, but he was also an attorney. And so he wanted to, when his wife converted, his goal was to disprove Christianity, and he went through all the different things about it, trying to disprove the Bible in its accuracy and things along those ways. And the problem that he had is when he started to look into it from a trying to be objective and not, let his biases get into him, trying to actually write an article. There was a series of articles he wrote trying to disprove it. He kept finding that, certain things are true. And I had a similar experience when I tried to be objective and tried to find different things. I kept coming back to the historical accuracy of the Bible, the extra biblical information that we have about Jesus and his death and things along those lines. And so in a sense, it just kept seeming to be true after trying to find those things.
Okay. All right. 5-minute timer is we are up, but would you like to keep going?
Well, I would.
I can set for 5 more minutes.
If you had questions or I'd love to be able to let you have a chance to ask questions or anything if you had.
All right. All right. Let me set it for 5 more minutes. Unfortunately, the timer I have doesn't have like an audible alarm, so
sure.
You're just gonna have to trust me on that. But okay, so we'll just set it for 5 more minutes, and then we'll just keep going. Okay. So I do have some questions. So, sure. Okay. So let me ask you this, Dirtrider. How confident are you that Christianity is the true religion on a scale of 0 to 100? So 100% being absolutely all confidence, no doubt. I don't need any other information. 0 being all doubt, no confidence. I need more information.
So I think that when I started researching it, looking into it, and things along those lines, and trying to be objective, I would say that I wasn't 100%. But as I've started to research different aspects of Christianity and things along those lines, and actually looking at other systems out there, what comes down to it, I feel like I am 100% there. But I would also say this:
okay.
if I'm wrong, right? The tenets that are taught in Christianity go along the lines of almost every other world religion, so no big deal. But if Christianity is right, and we do have a sin problem, and we do need that redemption, and I don't believe it, then I have a big problem.
Okay. Okay, so I hear what you're saying. So, okay. So if I'm hearing you right, you feel like you're at 100%. However, am I right in saying that you're leaving room for the possibility that it could be another religion?
Right.
That maybe Christianity isn't right? Okay.
So
And that's contingent upon if whether or not there's a sin problem. So if there is a sin problem, then, and if you're not a Christian, then that could be a problem for you.
mm-hmm. That
Got
pretty
it.
much sums that up.
Okay, got it. I just want to be sure I'm on the same page with you. Okay, and then you mentioned historical evidence. That was one reason. That was one reason why you think it's true. And then are there? And then that makes up that drives your 100% confidence. Is there anything else that you can think of that drives your 100% confidence besides historical evidence?
So, you know, a lot of people would say that your experience with things is anecdotal. So, but I will say
like
that
personal experience.
Yes. So, like if you're actually talking to
personal
someone,
experience. Okay.
And again, I know you're not trying to debate. So, but if I were to go into a debate and say, hey, these are my experiences, people would tend to say, well, that's you. And, I understand that. But I do have some experiences in life where I definitely have felt like I've been in the presence of God guiding different situations and things along those lines. And that's definitely helped build that 100% accuracy, not just the other aspects of things.
Okay.
But when I talk about it to people who might be questioning or in trying to describe it, I try to be objective and not just let my personal experience lead the way.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Because now I'd like to see the weight of each reason why. Because so far we have two, and there may be more, but I'll start here. So I just want to see what the weight of each reason that's driving your confidence level. So if you hadn't had any personal experiences or anecdotal experiences, however you'd like to phrase it, would that lower?
So looking through everything and I don't know that I would say it would lower it, but that would certainly make me more anxious to go through and look at more of the historical facts and things along those lines.
I see. Okay. So I'm sorry to cut in, but just to clarify, you would look at when you say you look a little anxious about the historical evidence, what do you mean by that?
So if I hadn't had experience, then I would only be able to look at the historical evidence and see what was there to be able to prove it, right? So I would say that my experience kind of backs up the looking at the facts and things along those lines, as opposed to my experience driving me to look for more facts, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I see where you're going with that. So it sounds like the personal experiences back or confirm the historical evidence and that you found, or just historical data or historical evidence. Now, so kind of so just kind of get a gauge. Okay, so now I'll take it the other way. How much do you think your confidence level would lower, if any, if you didn't have if there wasn't any historical evidence, or maybe somebody said to you, "Hey, Dirtrider," or if you found out somehow and you verified it to your satisfaction that the historical evidence did not support your confidence, how far do you think your confidence would lower, if any? And if it's zero, that's fine too. Yeah, but I just want to see the weight of what's driving your confidence.
So I would say I would say, because I've had those things in my life where I would say the anecdotal side of things, I would say that it would be less. But if I didn't have either, then obviously I would be very skeptical.
You'd be very skeptical. Okay, well, that's a good way to go here. So that's an interesting thing you bring up. So if you didn't have either historical evidence or nor neither historical evidence nor anecdotal experiences, personal experiences,
Mhm.
how far do you think? How much confidence do you think you would have in the truth of Christianity? Like, what percentage do you think you'd be at?
So if I didn't have any experience and everything led to it being incorrect, I would,
Yeah,
at the certain
yeah,
point, I
yeah.
would say
Let's.
it wouldn't even be worth the time to look into it, right? If you could go back
Oh, so it
through,
would be like,
it would be
hmm,
significant.
so it'd be like almost
Um,
nothing.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
But that being said, because those things are there, I would say that I'm 100%. If those things weren't there, I wouldn't say zero. It might go down to 27, 25%, just because there are so
Twenty-five
many
percent.
people. Right, right. If I had to put a value
Yeah.
on it, that's a
Okay.
little harder to do, but
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, and and I'm not going to hold you to these values. So don't think I'm just going to tie you to that post. Don't worry about that. It's just to help me understand, like, kind of, I'm kind of pie charting this in my head,
Sure.
and so it sounds like 75% for you is anecdotal experience, personal experience, and historical evidence. So that's about 70. That makes up about 75%, and roughly 25%. And I'm just kind of keeping the numbers easy, just so my
Right.
math is easy. Roughly
Yeah.
25% is something else. And what would you say that 25% is?
Um, the the fact that so many people would say it's accurate. The
Okay,
the factor of how many people I know who would have it. It would be enough for me to
got it.
start looking into it, but it wouldn't be enough for me to necessarily believe by itself
Okay.
at 25%.
All right. Okay. So I'm gonna look at this pie chart a little bit differently now, so that we've kind of fleshed out what the pie chart looks like.
Sure.
So let's say you have historical evidence, so you get to keep that.
Mhm.
You get to keep your anecdotal experiences, but then there's just some information out there that just negates the 25%, which is so many people believe it.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a scientific explanation for it. I don't know. I don't know what that is, but I'm just trying to just in your mind, it just somehow negates that 25%. Um, is there anything else that kind of holds up your confidence? So if it's, um, so would you still be at 75%, or is there anything else that's really driving that?
So I so if you were to take those things away, which
Mm-hmm.
it's at this point kind of harder to do than I would say if I hadn't studied it and things along those lines. But if you take
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
all away, um, the the things that you and see again, if you take the people away, then there's not a lot of evidence there, right? So if you say this,
Mm-hmm.
um, but like um, stories that I've heard from different missionaries who've gone into regions of the earth that don't have the communications that we have, don't have written words,
Mm-hmm.
things along
Mm-hmm.
those lines. When they
Mm-hmm.
tell the story of the gospel, they oftentimes hear things such as we've seen that in the stars, we've just not had the particular names associated with
Mm-hmm.
things and things along those lines. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that there is evidence in nature that we can see that points to the gospel and what the gospel says. Um,
Okay.
as a whole, though, is that enough for me personally to believe? I don't know. I'm a little bit more skeptical in life, as
Mm.
as as someone who's gone through different education things along those lines. I've become more skeptical of things, but then
Mm-hmm.
again, when I keep coming back and trying to look at the biblical picture with a skeptical mind, um, the answer seems to come back to point back to it being correct.
It all being correct. So it all just makes sense for you.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay. 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 And thanks for that. That's a really clear statement. So thanks. Appreciate that. Okay. So I think I'm kind of at the end. So I'm
sure.
kind of at the end of what I want to know. And then after that, you can ask me questions. So, and actually you can this whole time, but, so don't think this is one sided. So you
You
want
know,
to throw in a question, feel free.
if you have other guests, I want to be respectful of their time, so I don't want
Oh, I
to try
appreciate that. Okay.
to do that. But
Okay.
one of the
Okay.
things that I would say is that if you are skeptical and you are trying to figure out what is truth and what things are, I think the
Mm-hmm.
Bible is clear that we should taste and see. We should go examine and see things for ourselves. And um, I would encourage you to do that. But the other thing
Okay.
I would say is that um, that if you do have if you're not in a place where you're skeptical, if you're another person and maybe you believe like your last guest did in atheism and that which
Mm-hmm.
points to the fact that there might not be a God. Actually, they would say there is no God. um, I I would challenge them to kind of go look through the things and try to be objective, because oftentimes I have found that there's a lot of people who don't believe in some sort of in religion. um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason for it. Something happened that has been negative to them, and I would encourage them to look at
Mm.
it from that perspective. Just try to prove it wrong, because I have found that when people do that, they often come to the conclusions that Lee Strobel did, that there's not true evidence that really points to it being wrong. So,
Okay. Okay. So that actually kind of leads into the question I was going to ask you. So thanks for that.
okay.
Um, okay. So let's say a person does what you suggest and they look into um, like different religions and they do their research and pretty much how you said to do it.
Hmm.
And then they also have historical evidence and they have personal experience, but it leads them to a different conclusion. Let's
Sure.
say Hinduism is the true religion.
And and that's the conclusion that they came to. Hmm.
Yeah, and then they like you. They have the same pie chart as you, Dirtrider.
Hmm.
They have 75% is historical evidence and a mix of historical evidence and personal experience, and then the other 25% is so many people believe it. So many people believe in a higher power. So that's just I have a hard time believing that we're under some kind of mass delusion. Would that be a right way to say that? I don't want to like mischaracterize what that 25% is, but that's how I
So,
imagine it to be. So if
so
I'm wrong, please correct me.
yeah. So here's here's the thing. Like, um, I would and again, I'm trying not to get into like a debate type mode, because that's obviously another reason for
No, and
your
that's
job.
not what I'm trying to do either. Yeah, and this is an
So,
imaginary person. It's not me or anybody. It's just an
sure.
imaginary person. Yeah.
Um, you know, here's the 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 thing that I would come back to. Um,
All right.
if we look at them coming to the conclusion that Hinduism is right, um, in that that's their belief, um, and they've gone through the steps of reviewing things in Christianity, and in they have a concrete understanding of what it teaches, and they've
Mm-hmm.
come to that. There is a point that, like, if I were trying to be an evangelistic person or missionary and trying to convince them, there is some truth that there are people that the Bible says, you can't throw pearls in front of swine. And I'm not trying to insult the imaginary person here, But if that's the belief that they come to and they're doing it, I'm not one to say that we should try to force a decision out of someone just to get a decision, because at the end of the day, that's not what we are supposed to do. We're supposed to go tell, and if that person makes that decision, um, that's really on them.
Mm,
So
mm,
I wouldn't necessarily, I would say that we need to be civil, we need to be friends, and
hmm.
things along those lines. And people can disagree with each other and still be friends, right? And
Right.
still live things. But at the same point, um, our job is to tell them about who Jesus is, about what
Mm,
happens at the end of life. And if they're wrong, or if they choose not to believe that, then at the end of the day, they're accountable for their choices, right? So I wouldn't say
hmm.
that necessarily it's my job to debate or argue with someone along those lines.
Okay. Well, I guess, and I agree with you on that. Like, people can believe whatever they want to believe. I
Mm-hmm.
do agree with you on that. Um, Let me put it another way. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say an alien visited our planet. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say there's an alien that visited our planet, and so they know nothing about our religions.
Mm-hmm.
They touch down, and but they're interested in understanding what that is. Let's just say,
Mm-hmm.
and so then they're talking to different people. So they let's just say they talk to you, and you say, yeah, it's personal experience. It is, and also it is historical evidence, and the fact that there's so many people that believe in a higher power. That's what did it for me. That's why I believe in this so strongly, 100%. And then they talk to a Hindu person who says the exact same thing: personal experience, um, historical evidence that Hinduism is true, and that there are just so many people who believe in a higher power. So that's why I am 100% convinced that Hinduism is true. So now, um,
What
so
would what would I say to the alien?
it, yeah. Well, how would the alien figure out which one is true? Because unless you believe that both can be true.
I would say I don't believe that. So I
Okay.
couldn't
So
say
if
that both
only
could be true.
one can, okay, so if only one can be true, how would the alien figure out which one is true?
So there is a documentary series called The Gospel in the Stars, which goes through and
Hmm.
kind of fits perfectly with your background that talks about that shows the stars. If you look at the constellation in the stars, you actually can see the whole gospel story that we find in the Bible of Jesus dying on the cross and all of those things actually
Mm.
in the stars. Now, um,
Hmm.
if I was talking to someone from outer space who would obviously have traveled in the stars to get here in the first place, I would encourage them to look at that and to look at all the things way that nature itself kind of points um, out the what the biblical truths that we can find. For example, um, there's a molecule in our cells that hold our cells together. It's the molecule that holds
Hmm.
everything. If you look at it from at a um, under a high-powered microscope, it actually forms the shape of the cross. Now that you could obviously say, well, that's that's debatable. That's not that's harder to that's something that's easily explained by science or things along those lines.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but then when you look at the stars and the different things, the way that the gospel has been presented in those areas, you could also make an argument for how many different signs do we have to see where we can see different aspects of the gospel being pointed out in nature. Um,
Mm.
you know, removing the Bible, removing ancient texts and things along those lines. If we're able to look at all of those different things, the, then we have to come to a conclusion that that that's where the gospel is. And I'm not,
Mm.
again, like I said, if I would want to be friends with the aliens, so I would do everything I could to help explain that, and
Yeah.
be a good ambassador for my faith to said alien. Um, but at the same time, you know, the, there is a lot of evidence in nature itself that points to it. But for me, um, my foundation goes back to going back and researching everything and finding out the truths in a more of a investigational type method. That's not to say that
Hmm.
there aren't different ways to prove the gospel. That's just saying you would be able to talk to the alien and try to make a, assuming we can communicate with the alien, you can point these different things out and see the gospel in those lights.
Okay. Okay. And now have you looked at evidence from Hinduism, say, and to determine if it lines up with your confidence level and your beliefs?
So I've done a study that goes um, into different beliefs. For example, I've read um, the vast majority of the Quran. There's different things that I've done to go through and try to validate those things. But
Hmm.
obviously, we all have some sort of bias, right? So this
True.
was post becoming a Christian in my beliefs. Um,
Hmm.
when I go through and look at those things, obviously, I'm looking at it through the lens that I've already established.
Hmm.
Um, the reason I do that, though, is also to help me relate to those different people groups. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so um, now there's not. I'm not going to say that I agree with the something like the Quran, but there are a lot of things in there um, that are great things, great values to live by, and things along those lines. But when I look at
Mm.
those things,
Mm.
I come back to it becomes a work base. We have to work to gain our way into heaven. When I look at Christianity, the difference being um, that we can see that that's made a path that was made from God to us to get us into heaven, and there's nothing that we really have to do outside of that. Now, people would say, well, suddenly you have to stop sinning and things along those lines. Well, I've not met anyone who has stopped sinning, right? I personally
Mm.
probably have told thousands of lies in my life. I'm sure that if you ask someone how many lies if you've said in your life, that the number would be quite high.
Hmm.
In
Hmm.
fact, I don't know that most people try to keep count of those types of things. We would probably go,
Mm.
um, we would probably have a hard time doing that. Um,
Mm.
but at the same time, um, you know, it's out of respect for what God has done that I have a desire to stop, try not to sin, to try to
Mm.
do these different things. Um, and so
Okay.
that's kind of where I would look at it like that. And if
Okay.
I was talking to an alien, obviously, um, you know, I would like to. I'm an inquisitive person, so my first thing that I would try to do is try
Mm.
to understand where they come from, because they
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
an alien probably has their own set of values and beliefs and things along those lines that
Hmm.
we've not thought of. So,
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds to me because you mentioned, hey, I would try to be as diplomatic as possible, and it sounds like you try to be as good of a host to the alien as possible, and show them around and things like that. So you sound like a really really nice person. Number one. So
thank you.
you sound, yeah, like super super nice. So that I think that alien would agree. So I so and then you mentioned and yeah, I'm almost at the end, so I only have a few more questions. But
Sure.
um, you mentioned sin in the very beginning, and then I heard you mention it again just now,
Hmm.
and then you mentioned the word values when referring to the Quran, that it shared similar values with Christianity. So would it be fair to say that it's clear that it's important to you to be a like a good person or a good moral person? It sounds like that
So I think that in general, even if I wasn't a believer in my faith, that is something I would say is something that we should do, is to be good people.
Mm.
We're all fighting the same. We all are living lives. They're different lives, but we're all trying to
Hmm.
make it off of this. Trying to get through life in general. So
Yeah, get through life.
My standpoint would be that, in to be when I've spoke to I have friends who have different faiths than I do, and when I talk to them about things, you know, I don't think that we prove religion by fighting. It's not something
Mm,
that we're never going to. It's kind of like having a Facebook argument with someone. We're never going to convince someone of things by
hmm
not being appreciative of who they are and their background and the things that they have, right?
hmm
Um, so
hmm
I would have a hard time um, myself. I think that we should all be the best people that we can be, and that's religion aside, that we should all be help each
hmm
other out because that's that's who we are. And I realize there are people who don't have the same type of values that I do, but that's the thing that I've kind of came to take away is that um, we
Okay.
we're there. But yes, you know,
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
we do have to we do have a problem that we all eventually have to deal with. There's no one who's not going to die, right? 10 out of 10 people die. It's the ultimate statistic, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so
Right.
and so how we I think it's important that we look for what the truth is and we try to find the truth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you, how do you think your life would be if you, let's just say tomorrow, and I don't know the reason why this would happen, but let's just say tomorrow, let's focus on the result that let's just say tomorrow you decided to abandon your beliefs in Christianity. How do you think your life would look from that point forward?
Um, so that's really a tough question. That's an interesting question. I've not ever been posed that question before. Um,
Mm,
if I were to, for some reason, decide that to switch uh, beliefs into that, let's just say that some evidence came out and said that completely disproved everything. And
mm.
again, going back to your
Let
original
me
where
let me
we
stop you right there. Let me clarify what I mean. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me clarify what I mean. Um, what I mean is not just the Christian faith, but no belief at all.
Mhm.
That's what I mean. Like you
so
abandon your belief in God entirely.
so
So,
I
which means it.
overnight become an atheist, essentially.
Yeah, let's just say for think of it just a wild set of circumstances happen between now and tomorrow,
Sure.
and which leads to you just saying, you know what, I'm not a believer at all anymore. So from that point forward, what do you think your life would look like?
Um, so that's a weird position to be in, but let's say that that's what happened. Obviously, um, I that there's not a lot of hope in something that with no belief.
No
Um,
hope.
it would be kind of like being in a dark hole, right? At a certain point, we all
Hmm.
become, in business, you're told never to treat someone like a number, right? And
Hmm.
at a certain point, we just become that number. We're just another thing that's here. I don't know that that would change me trying to be nice to people because I'm a firm believer in it's nice to be nice.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I know atheists who take that position. And one thing that I that kind of I I've met people who if they find out someone's an atheist, they kind of begrudge them a bit because of that. And I don't think I could ever get to the point that I'm holding something against a person just because they don't have a belief. But
Hmm.
if I got to the point where I totally, you know, I would it would feel like we were just another number. But the same question could be posed to them
Hmm.
if what the Bible says is true and they are an unbeliever and they die and they find that go and they find out that Christianity is right. Um, they have a much bigger problem to deal with, right? Than
And wait, and just refresh my memory. Which problem is that again?
their sin problem. The problem that
Sin problem. Okay.
right. So how have
Okay.
they dealt with that? So if suddenly I stop
Okay.
believing in things like that, then I have a big problem that I would face, obviously, having that. And
You
that
got the sin problem.
that would definitely be something that would weigh heavily on me. So I think it
Okay.
would be
So is
hard
no, go ahead.
to
Sorry,
make that
finish.
to make that change would be a really drastic change. But I would, I would still have to figure out how do I deal with that.
Okay. All right. I just have a few more questions because you're saying some really, really interesting stuff. So I apologize, but like I said, if you want to tap out, feel free. But I just have a few more. I promise.
And by the way, I don't think I appreciate your questions. A lot of people,
good. I'm glad.
you set yourself up to, if I want to bow out, because I don't think anyone can speak negatively because you've been such a kind host.
Oh, good. That's what I aim to do. And like I said, it's here to understand and to really put your beliefs on the table and just unpack everything and just see, hey, what's that? And I see like new stuff and that looks interesting. And just a second, Jay So Crazy. I'm almost done here. So yeah, it's really interesting to me to just say, hey, what's that thing? Can we talk about that for a second? So that's me. I'm just full of wonder when it comes to this. And okay, so it sounds like then that because you said you mentioned the sin problem yet again, and so I can't. It's a really shiny object on the table, so I can't get away from that. So the sin problem that you're talking about. So is it? And so it sounds like God or belief in Christianity and God pretty much solves that sin problem for you. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Because in Christianity, we would say that Jesus died for our sins, and that was
got it.
That would be the equivalent of someone going into the courtroom and say, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and pay his fine, and I will take his place in jail." And the judge agreeing just along those lines. Okay.
Does that mean that your belief then? Okay, so it takes care of the sin problem. So, and what I suspect is somebody commits a sin and then they die. In what you're saying is they'll be okay as long as they believe in Jesus.
Correct. It is my there's debate on whether hell is literal or not, and I'm not trying to debate that. But what is evidence is that God said that He is righteous and that you can only be in His presence if you are been made righteous. And so my belief is that eternal separation is a big problem that we have to deal with. Even if you don't believe in a literal hell, you still. It would be a bigger problem if you are separated completely from God, because at the end of the day, everything that is good comes from God. It is what we would say is the truth. So
so now when I hear the word sin, I think of morality, something an immoral act, right? But I hear like separation and things like that. So is it? And it sounds like, and then you did say if a person commits sins and then they die, then as long as they believe in Jesus, they'll be okay. And I'm thinking that let's just say a person is committing a sin and then they die, like they're in the middle of committing a sin and they die. Like I don't want to make it so drastic. Let's just say the person is just tells a lie, like you said earlier. Would that count as a sin? Okay. So a person is in the middle of telling a lie and then they unalive. They just so there's no opportunity for redemption, no saying sorry, something like that. They're okay. But now a person who I'm almost done. A person who is not in the middle of committing a sin and they unalive. So there's no need technically for them to ask for forgiveness or say sorry or anything like that. But as long as they believe in Jesus, they'll be okay too. Am I on the right track here?
So that's a tricky one because there's such a thing as generational sin and things along those lines. But
Oh,
I
okay.
strictly looking at it from a person's life. Say that there is
Okay.
a child. Let's say that they are a 1 year old and something tragic happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's sad, but I know of a child who recently drowned, right? Um,
Mm.
in those
Yeah, that's sad.
cases,
I'm sorry to hear
it
that.
right, and it's always tragic. And to be honest with you, I had never been to a child's funeral until that point, and it was probably the saddest funeral I had ever been to. Um,
Yeah, that must be. Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. Oh,
but so
it's
um,
it's
at
making me have some feels just thinking about it. I'm sorry. Keep going.
yeah, at a certain point, you're not able to make a decision for that, and so there's a lot of discussion around something called the age of accountability and things along those lines. And
Mm,
to be honest
mm.
with you, um, I would say that there's also people who have difficulties um, mentally being able to make that decision. Would they be under that? There's a lot of questions kind of around that topic, but at the same time,
Okay.
it is it's we there is a point in our lives that we realize that we've done wrong, and that might be different for different people. Um, but there's a point that
Okay.
we our conscience, which con means with, and um, shins means with knowledge, like
Okay.
science.
Okay.
We make mistakes and we do it with the knowledge that we've done something wrong. We know that what we've done isn't correct. At that point,
Got
then
it. Okay.
um,
Okay. I understand.
we have we are accountable for that. So
Okay. Okay. I'm with you. Um, so I guess I didn't think enough to throw in some conditions in there. So what you're saying is that um, sin there is some conditions on like you have to know that what you're doing is wrong, and so obviously a person with the mental capacity to not know what they're doing is wrong, which would include like babies and things like that, would probably be excluded from this because
right,
or babies don't have the mental capacity to believe in God yet, like
right. They don't.
they're just unaware. So there's okay, got it. Okay, so we're talking about people who do have the mental acuity and mental capacity to know right from wrong and
Mhm,
to believe in Jesus. Okay, so there's
mhm,
two things there: to know right from wrong and to believe in Jesus. Um, so thinking about that, um, is there um, is it a question of morality
So
or
the term sin comes from an archery term that means missing the mark, right? You could
mm-hmm.
consider it morality, but but the way that I
Well,
like to.
I'm more interested in what you consider it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I know you're clarifying, but it's what you consider it.
Um, I think the easiest way to look at sin and to understand what sin is to look at the Ten Commandments. Um, they
Mm-hmm.
they're they A lot of people think that those are necessarily rules to live by, but really the point of the Ten Commandments is to show us in the state that we're in, right? If I've if I've
Mm-hmm.
gone and I've gone and had lunch and I ate cake and I had cake all over my face, I look like I was just. You see those pictures of people getting married and they smash cakes into their spouse's face for the first
Right.
time. I had the cake on my face, and then I went through the day not knowing that the cake was there. And I
Mm.
went through the day. I had important business meetings and things along those lines. And at the same time, everyone sees it but me, right? I don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Mm-hmm.
go into the restroom at a certain point in time. I'm washing my hands, and I look in the mirror, and suddenly I see the cake on my face, and I realize, oh, this has been on me for the past hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever that time frame
Mm.
it be. It's not the cake's fault that the cake is on my face, right? Um, I
Mm-hmm.
suddenly have become aware of the fact that the cake's on my face. So now I have to do something about said cake. Um, but it's not the cake's fault that it was there. Much like at a time that we are going through life and we do something, we tell lies, um, or let's make it more simple than that. We've stolen something. The piece
Mm-hmm.
of bubble gum at the store was too tempting, and I needed a piece of bubble gum, so I went ahead and I took the piece of bubble gum and put it in my pocket, and didn't pay for it. So I've done that. I have to. I have done something wrong, and if you want to say that that's a morality thing, then I would agree with that. But I would also say it's more about our actions and what the things that we've done in our lives that
Mm.
are those ways.
Okay. Well, Dirtrider, are you still stealing bubblegum? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No.
Just kidding. Um, okay. All right. So I guess all right. So this will be my last question.
Sure.
Um, so how then, just based on what you just said, how then would you, and you may be repeating yourself. So yeah, and that's okay. And forgive me if you feel like you're repeating yourself. But just so I'm clear, how would you interpret someone personally is a good moral person that you see as a good moral person? They do good things, but they hold the opposite belief that you do. Um, how would you interpret that person, or how would you see that person?
So I just as kind of a thought, my standards aren't necessarily what God's standards are. Now,
Mm,
if it's because in God's standards, um, sin is weighted equally, right? We're all guilty under the law, and we have that problem.
mm,
Um, my
mm,
my standards would be obviously. I wouldn't think of someone stealing bubble gum as necessarily as atrocious as someone who's done something um, like um, like a someone who has unalived other people. I'm trying to make sure I'm being TikTok sensitive as well, to respect you and not
mm.
get you there. Um,
Thanks.
if um,
Appreciate that.
if if I um, in my eyes, I'm probably going to treat the person, knowing that someone has done that. I'm obviously going to be more cautious about being around someone in that situation, right? Someone who's unalive someone, as opposed to, to me, it's not going to be a big deal that someone stole bubblegum. Um, but in God's eyes, and what we can see, and you see this throughout, there seems to be a common thread throughout all of the religions,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
that 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 anything is any kind of immoral act, if you will, uh, to go back to it being a moral question, is a big problem. Um, so so how would I treat them? Probably, I would obviously have some things in my head, but at the end of the day, the real question is what does how does God see that? How does God look at those
Mm,
things? And so
mm-hmm.
that's where I would go
Okay.
with that.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that's all I have. So, Dirt Righty, anything you want to ask me
No,
before
I
we
just wanted
wrap
to
this up?
say I appreciate your life, and
Yeah.
if there's people trying to find truth, I would encourage them to look objectively at the different things. Be like a reporter. Try to disprove God's existence, and go
Mm,
through that, and let the path go the way that it's going to go. Because
okay.
I think
Okay.
at the end of the day, we have to make that decision for ourselves. No one's going to make that
Mm-hmm.
decision for them. I'm more than happy to always answer a question for someone and try to do it, but I can't make that decision for someone. That's something that's between them
Yeah.
and God. I can't do it for my kids. Um, that's going to be something that they have to figure out themselves. I'm going to try to give them as
Yeah.
much information as possible. And to be honest with you, I want to be objective. I want them to look at different religion systems, because I think it's important that they don't just do something because I did it. But that would be my challenge for anyone who is trying to find what the true religion is, who's trying to figure out your prompt, is to be objective, go look through the evidence themselves, and make a decision based on that.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that. And, I would like to, I want to move on to other people, but
Sure.
Hopefully you'll follow me, because what I would like is that if you came back, because I think the thing about this also is that, having one conversation, you can get into a lot of, you do have to cut it short, but I would love to explore with you. You mentioned something about sin and it all pretty much being equal. And I'd really love to explore that with you some other time.
Sure.
So hopefully you follow me, and if you see me on, jump in and we can talk about that. Hopefully I'll remember. I may actually write down your handle, and then what about that, just so I remember. Yeah, because that would be great to talk about. But I really enjoyed this conversation. So
it was a pleasure to have a conversation, and thank you for not being someone looking to debate everything, because a lot of people on this platform do seem to want to have a debate, not a conversation. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I do like this approach myself too. So it sounds like you enjoyed it. Yeah,
I did. Yeah.
Good. That's I'm happy to hear that. So that makes me feel good. So that's a good thing. All right.
Well, you have a good day.
Again, thanks again, Dirtrider. Have a good day. Yeah, take care. We'll see you soon.